Hi folks, I'm Ben. Welcome back to Ben Reads Good. 2023's Pulitzer Prize for Fiction is due to be awarded on the 9th of May. There is no long list, no short list, no particular build-up hype, and so predicting the winner is a bit of a fool's errand. But today I'm going to don the clown makeup and with a glass of wine I am going to be that fool because why not? I should say right off the bat that I am by no means a Pulitzer expert. Greg over at Supposedly Fun is way more knowledgeable than I am on this, and he's got a great predictions video that I'll link down in the description if you want to watch that afterwards. When I think of the Pulitzer, I think for some reason of self-serious, haughty, important fiction. And I know that can be off-putting for some people because it feels quite inaccessible. But when you actually look at the winners over the last 10 years, there have been some really great, accessible, and frankly really popular books that have taken home the prize, including things like Less by Andrew Sean Greer, The Overstory by Richard Powers, which I absolutely loved and recently reviewed on my channel, All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, which is a really beloved book, and The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, which if you haven't read it is absolutely fantastic. One of the best books I read in the year that I read it. And what that says to me is that the haughtiness and importance that the Pulitzer projects is probably more of a branding thing than the actual truth of the matter. And so there's nothing really to be afraid of or intimidated by the Pulitzer. It's a really great prize and it awards some novels that are worth everyone reading, not just literary fiction aficionados. As part of my research for this video, I had a quick read through of the rules, and it's actually really simple. So to be eligible, a book needs to be a work of fiction, it needs to be written by an American citizen, and it needs to have been released as a physical book for the first time in 2022 and published by an American-based press. A good Pulitzer Prize for Fiction book should, in theory, address some aspect of American culture or life. But that's not really a rule. If you look at something like All the Light We Cannot See, that's a World War II book set almost entirely in France, and I can't remember if there are even any American characters in it. So basically, the playing field is wide open as long as you are an American author. There were actually three really interesting things that I learned from reading the rules. So firstly, there are no restrictions on the form that the fiction can take. Although historically the literary novel has dominated the prize, it can be won by a short story collection, a thriller, sci-fi, you name it. There's no restriction on the genre of the book. Secondly, the rules explicitly say that as long as a book meets the other criteria, self-published works are entirely eligible. I'm not sure what that means for the rule around needing to be published by an American press. Perhaps the self-publishing services count as an American press. But that to me is really interesting. I know we haven't seen a self-published finalist or winner, but the fact that it's that open is pretty cool. And then thirdly, anyone can nominate the book. It doesn't need to have been the author or the publisher. If you fill out the form and you pay your $75, you can nominate any book you like so long as it meets the other criteria. That's a world away from the Booker Prize, which has these really complex rules around the publisher needing to be the one to make the submission, and the number of books that a publisher can submit depends on the number of times they have been longlisted and shortlisted and won, and if an author's won, they automatically get submitted again in the future. All really complex, but in the Pulitzer, it's super simple. Anyone can nominate any number of books as long as they pay. Money talks in America, apparently. Taken together though, I don't know if this means that the judges are absolutely inundated with entries and maybe they don't read them all in full, because if they get thousands and thousands of books nominated, they can't possibly read all of those in the time they need to judge the prize. It is also worth noting that the judges take from the submitted books only a set of 3 finalists, and they present those to the board to choose the winner. They do recommend a winner, and often the board will choose the same book that's recommended, but they don't have to, and they don't actually have to always award the prize. In 2012, they famously did not award the prize. The 3 books nominated in that year were Karen Russell's Swamplandia, Dennis Johnson's Train Dreams, and a posthumous release from David Foster Wallace called The Pale King. I've actually read 2 of the 3 of those, and I am really surprised that they would be unwilling to award the prize to Dennis Johnson, who is a really talented American author. Anyway, on to my predictions. So on the 9th of May, there'll be 3 finalists announced, and one of them will be diagnosed as the winner. Nope, they will not be diagnosed, they will be designated as the winner. And so originally I was gonna just pick 3 books to try and predict, but that feels like such a shot in the dark that it is almost a waste of time. So I have picked 6 books that I think are in contention, and hopefully we'll see at least one of those pop up on the day, but who knows. The first book that I think is in contention is Trust by Hernan Diaz. This is actually the US edition because the UK cover is incredibly ugly, and actually it's coming out shortly in paperback, and somehow they have managed to give it a completely different yet also ugly cover, which doesn't chime with the vibe of the book at all. It looks like an Amor Towles book, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I like Amor Towles' work. But if you go in expecting that, you're going to be sorely disappointed. This was one of my favourite books that I read in 2022, and it's a very clever sequence of books within this book. The opening premise is a novel by a fictional author about a powerful New York couple, Benjamin and Helen Rask. Benjamin Rask is a finance tycoon, and there is a lot of finance in this book, but don't let that put you off, because this is an immensely clever book about the American dream, about who gets to tell stories and the myths we weave about notable people, and ultimately about mental health. Hernan Diaz was a finalist in 2018 with In the Distance, the year in which Les actually won. So I think this is really in with a shot. Diaz is a great, thoughtful writer deploying a number of styles in this book, and I think it really fulfills the brief of addressing American life. The next book I think we might see is True Biz by Sarah Novich. I haven't read this one, but I've seen a lot of love for it and I'm looking forward to getting into it. This is about students at a school for the deaf called River Valley. I've heard it's great in terms of disability rep and handles the presentation of deaf culture with a lot of care. From the blurb, it seems like it also deals with body autonomy and civil rights. And I think it's exciting it's doing that from a perspective that we don't see enough of in popular fiction. And that for me is what puts it in the frame for a Pulitzer. The exploration of these important American debates that play out again and again in many different communities, but from a new perspective. We've seen breakthrough films about deaf lives, like The Sound of Metal and Coda, come through really strongly in the Oscars in recent years. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we also see the same representation start to bubble up in literary prizes. Speaking of big American debates, Jennifer Hayes' Mercy Street is another title whose timeliness and portent makes it a strong contender. I don't think it's actually been released in the UK, but I listened to the audio last year and I really enjoyed it. It's about an abortion clinic called Mercy Street, and our main protagonist is one of the counsellors who works there. She's called Claudia, and she's dealing with frequent protests and this creepy discovery that someone is taking unsolicited photographs of the women visiting the clinic and then posting them online to sort of shame the women. But that's not really a spoiler because this isn't a mystery book. As well as Claudia's perspective, we also see points of view of some other characters, including a very lonely protester just looking for community, and a white supremacist prepper who is quite scary to get into the mind of. Considering how polarizing and sensitive the topic of abortion is, it deals with it with a surprisingly good sense of humor without compromising the seriousness of the debate. I think it did just a really fantastic job of addressing this topic without being too preachy or didactic, and also just being a really good read. If you haven't given it a go, I would highly recommend it. Okay, next. I don't know how many times I can hold this book up in a video without having actually read it yet, but you knew it was coming. It's a prize prediction list in 2023, and so it would not be complete without Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead. You know what this one is about. It's a retelling of Dickens' David Copperfield set in 1980s Appalachia. This, for me, is a contender because it feels like the great American novel about the opioid epidemic that has ravaged many communities in the US. Kingsolver has a great track record and was a finalist in 1999, the year that Michael Cunningham's The Hours won. And I wouldn't be surprised to see this on the list. It'll be really interesting if it does win, whether that has an impact on its chances in the Women's Prize. Although it feels like it shouldn't really matter, you can see a line of thinking for the judges where they might say that this book's been awarded enough already and they've got an opportunity to share the love and recognise more authors. It'll be really interesting to see how this plays out, because I know this book has got a lot of super fans who would love to see it win the Pulitzer, the Women's Prize, the Booker Prize. And I am very excited to read this. I know I say this every time and have still not gotten around to it, but I am probably going to do a reading vlog of my experience as I work my way through it. So watch out for that in the near future. My fifth pick is If I Survive You by Jonathan Escoffery. This is a collection of interlinked short stories, and we haven't seen a title like that win since Jennifer Egan's A Visit from the Goon Squad in 2011. This is about a Jamaican family that emigrates to the US and how they navigate their new lives, where the welcome is a bit less than warm. It begins in the late 70s and touches on topics that are still extremely relevant in today's America. Racism, financial crises, and an enormous life-threatening hurricane. This was really widely praised in 2022, and it appeared on so many best of the year lists that I saw, so I think it could well make an appearance as a finalist. Okay, for my last pick, I've gone a little bit rogue because the Pulitzer has this habit of throwing up books that I have literally never heard of, like last year's Monkey Boy. And in that spirit, I did a little bit of Googling, and I have picked out Ken Kalfus's 2 a.m. in Little America. This is a dystopia of sorts where some unnamed or undescribed calamity has sent the US into chaos, and our protagonist is an American refugee called Ron Patterson, who flees and he becomes a migrant worker in a number of countries and cities around Europe, I believe. I can't speak to how well this book achieves its goals. I don't really know much about it at all. But although it's not set in America, it seems like a book that is cleverly extrapolating from the current political turmoil to flip some of the public debates around migrants and labour rights on their heads. Kalfus has a decades-long career, and I've seen him described as a writer's writer, which to me seems like it might play well with the Pulitzer judges. So perhaps he'll be a surprise pick. So those are my 6 predictions, shots in the dark, whatever you want to call them, of what we might see pop up as the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction winner in 2023. But we don't have long to wait. It's just over a week until we find out who will win, and they do broadcast a live stream of the announcement of all the prizes. And although it is kind of a glorified, fusty old slideshow, I watched it last year and it was quite exciting. If you've read any of the books that I included in my predictions, I'd be really keen to hear what you thought of them. And if you think there are any books that are really solid contenders that I haven't mentioned, I'd love to know, because I am always intrigued by people's predictions. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more of my content, then hit the subscribe button. But until next time, cheers and toodles.